Okay, so we are live. Hello and welcome to the first Young World Federalists live stream. We have myself, the executive director of Young World Federalists, Luca, our events and strategy guy from Young World Federalists, and we also have Chris from the Young European Federalists. And today we're just going to talk about federalism in Europe and in the world, our two organizations, and the ways people can get involved, and the future collaboration between our two organizations. So first, Luca's going to start with presenting Young World Federalists, if that's all right.
Yeah, presentation, I think we have already the video that present the Young World Federalists, but yeah, let's say to summarize, this is a movement of young people that believes in World Federalism, and it promotes actions to reach the World Federation. And in the last year, so because I wanted to discuss a bit the achievements of the last year, so we reached more than 500 members on the Discord channel. We are now on all most important social media. Some of our chapters, they start to have their own social media. We have now around 15 chapters around the world. We are sending, since some months ago, the monthly newsletter with all the information of what's going on in the YWF. We had weekly community calls, normally during Sunday, and we are trying to collaborate as much as you can with all Federalist organizations, but this would be something that probably Daniel, John, and the others that we talk about in the evening session. And also, this is one of the reasons because Chris is here, because we want to discuss, what are the different possible collaborations in the future. Also because I'm a member of GEF2 and of the Union of European Federalists, so I feel like a bridge in this case. And for what concerns the goals for the next year principally, but also for the following years, we have a strategy timeline in place at the moment till 2023. But for the next year, basically the idea is, of course, we want to increase our number of supporters in the Discord channel. We want to send more information in newsletter. We would like to have more community calls. At a certain point, we would like to have community calls in different time zones, because we want to exploit the fact that we are in different time zones, but that should not be a weakness, but instead it should be a point of strength, because it means that basically the movement can work every time, 24 hours over 24 hours, 7 days over 7. Because there will be, if one zone is sleeping, the others are not, so they can work. And we are continuously rethinking our internal organization, and I was talking with Eston before that I think this process will continue till the first Congress that we aim to have in the next years. And we at the moment, the structure of the membership is not completely finished, but we are working on that. Especially Eston is working on a new system of membership. At the moment, basically, you subscribe to the newsletter, we can consider you as a member, but in the future, we would like to have something more structured and also flexible, in the sense that there would be possibility of different kind of membership considering the time and the money that you want to invest on the movement. Of course, we are considering the fact that some of our members, and in the future, most of our members, that will be in developing countries. So, of course, we take this into account when we talk about the eventual membership fees, of course. Basically, I think I talk already enough. Now, well, of course, the last thing is like we would like more people to join the global team and the chapters team. So in the newsletter, there are some links that they will bring you to some form to fill if you want to be more active. And this is something really that we would like more people to help us, for sure. And we have plenty of work, so don't worry. You will have something to do. And saying that, I think, Chris, is your turn.
All right. First, thank you for inviting me to speak to you guys and talk about how we can collaborate together. So my name is Chris. I'm on the board of Jeff Europe. Jeff stands for Young European Federalists. The J is because, well, French in history. We are 49 years old, so nearly 50, and we are the largest Federalist, pro-European youth movement that you can find anywhere. We also have a World Federalist agenda, so it's good that we are talking. No matter how you think a World Federation can come about, the way we visualize it is always having regions that integrate and then support a global agenda rather than like a really dispersed system. And so Europe, a united Europe, plays an important role in that. So for us in Jeff, we see the two as connected. We campaign for a European Federation all the time and to develop the European Union as the primary tool for doing that. But we also support a World Federation. We support global governance. And in practice, that means getting on board with initiatives to give a parliamentary democratic aspect to the United Nations. It means trying to create federalist structures in intergovernmental arrangements such as NATO. It means getting on board with things like the Sustainable Development Goals to advance their agenda as well. Climate change is obviously a huge issue that affects the whole world. We do a lot of work on that for Europe, but also trying to support it being addressed at a global level too. In Europe, we're based in every country pretty much by now. We have members in Moscow, we have members in London, we have members in Berlin and Rome and everywhere in between. About 10,000 in total. We organize that work into national sections. So we take a federated approach internally as well as externally. So we have our European level countries and then local sections, each doing their own activities, each supporting the campaign in different ways. I think that might be a good place to stop. And then if people have questions or comments, they can obviously ask, but we can get focused on how we can all work together.
I think an interesting place to start, and I know this is sort of we don't focus too much on this, but it's an interesting question. I'm going to try. I can even put it in the, when will we get some of our people in the United Nations? So this is a member of us who wants to know, and thinks about putting, getting like NGO status or something in the UN. Is that something Jeff has? Is that something you'd be interested in doing?
It's not something we have in the UN, and honestly, I think that's because we haven't thought about it. In fact, it might be better if we work together to get YWF that status. We do have a formal status in the European level equivalents, so we are represented in both the European Union and in the Council of Europe.
But yeah, definitely. Please, Eston.
I just I don't really know the process, and I think because we're so small, we don't really have we have no pay. We're all volunteers, so I don't know if that's even allowed to be in the UN as like an observing NGO or whatever the status is. if we're all just a volunteer group. But we could certainly try.
Let's look into it together. See what we can do.
Yeah, but in any case, the idea to get in contact with people at the United Nations is already part of our conversations. I think definitely is part of the long-term strategy for sure. But yeah, I think for example, first Congress could be a good occasion probably to invite people, and try to get contacts. That could be an idea too. But yeah, it's not so easy to become an NGO that is taken into account from United Nations. I mean, it's part of a process, of course. It's not something that happen easily, because I think, for example, I know that there are some forums, some fora, where basically some important NGO of the world, they have often contacts with members of the United Nations. I mean, I think about Amnesty International for sure, but they are very big and important NGO. So I mean, I'm sure we can at least try first to get informal contacts. That is something that can be done even tomorrow, probably. But if you think about a formal recognition, that is on the long term, definitely.
Yeah, another comment is something more general, opening a dialogue with UN or world leaders, and this is something that we're talking about. We're thinking of a letter writing campaign right now, but with the biggest hang up is we don't know who to send the letters to make the biggest impact. Do we do UN diplomats, or do we do the incoming US President Biden, or who's the right person to lobby here? Maybe Chris, you could explain sort of the theory of change behind Jeff, and how you guys are aiming to advocate for a federal Europe. What are some of the main programs you have?
Yeah. Well, I would say that the strength of Jeff, and I think it will be the same for YWF as it grows, is to take not just one approach, but several different ones in parallel from different levels of the organization. So when we're looking at the Jeff Europe level, where our office is based in Brussels, the institutions of the changes that we want to see, they are all here. And so that means for us, we're primarily contacting MEPs, the members of the European Parliament, who can advocate for what we want in the body that we see as the body that should be the supreme one in the European Union setup. So that can range. If we're campaigning, for example, on addressing rights violations in Belarus, which is what we were doing last year, then we get them to sign petitions. We get meetings with individuals in specific policy committees to then get amendments to on resolutions. It's a bit like playing Model UN, but with consequences. So we do a bit of that. But then the second side, and this is also as important, is to get societal engagement with the issues that we have. And I suppose we do that through two different methods at the same time. Our network of sections, they do a lot of civic education work. So in the European context, we call it the Europe at School program. Our volunteers go into schools, encourage debates among teenagers, a bit more direct learning for younger children. But they'll also go into town squares, engage with citizens directly. Do you know about this change that's coming? Do you know what federalism is? All these different questions. Because actually a lot of our mission in Europe is to make people aware of what federalism is, that it's not something to be afraid of, and why it would benefit concretely their lives. And then the good thing about this network of sections, countries having their own representatives, is they can directly address their own national leaders, regional leaders, town leaders. And this is something we've always done, and we haven't got the federation in Europe yet, but the small steps that have made the progress towards something like that have come about by lots of local actions happening over a sustained period of time. And I think, honestly, it's going to be similar with YWF. We could focus our attention on Joe Biden, who's doing a lot of well, he's going to have initiatives to bring together the alliance of democracies and so on to talk about a more joined up approach. That is an opportunity, but equally he's having to deal with the pandemic and the aftermath of Trump, so he can't be our only go-to. And we may find that smaller countries who have a good track record on global governance are another route we should look into, and set up relations with them who might champion our cause in for example, the UN.
Yeah, those are definitely some of the same pathways that we are that we want to go down, specifically with the education and getting our members out there in public and in schools. I really think that global citizenship education, it's a part of the Sustainable Development Goals, and it's something that we can definitely get behind and potentially even raise money for, which is the biggest question. So there's another question from Martin Chibanda, and he's our sort of our Africa lead. He's a small business owner in Botswana, and he's asking this question of how do young European Federalists support the efforts of the EU in terms of programs and activities. And I think that he's asking this question because I know Martin a little bit. I think that he's asking this question because he wants to use the YWF Africa to support the African Union in terms of programs and activities. So I think that he's sort of looking for tips in that way.
It's an interesting question, let's say.
Yeah.
Okay, perfect. Well, at some point I should speak to you, Martin, directly. I've got a very good friend who moved from Jeff to Tanzania last year, and she'll be there permanently, and she's very much a fan of the African Union and developing federalism in Africa. So I've probably found you a new friend. But okay, to answer your question. So I suppose that it's a bit complicated. In some ways, we don't always support the efforts of the EU, where it takes a more intergovernmental approach or it ignores the interests of certain stakeholders, then we're willing to criticize. We're also willing to criticize where it's had shortcomings. So on, for example, COVID, it's gone beyond what it's legally supposed to do in order to help people, and that's good. But the situation is such that the EU doesn't have direct competence on pandemics and healthcare. And these are things that we're highlighting as problems. So we're both a critic and a friend. We do, however, support a great deal of its programs. So, for example, we will work directly with things like the European External Action Service when they're talking about things like offering civil society support to Belarus. In Belarus, we will be one of those civil society actors talking to opponents on the ground. The area where we probably work the most, however, is on anything to do with education and youth participation in politics, which is a set of programs that the EU always dedicates funding to, cares about a lot. We obviously apply for funding from those programs, and then we use them to implement seminars, discussions, pedagogical projects, actions, usually around the topics of civics, global citizenship, e-democracy, the kind of things that the EU puts on its agenda, and then it has a youth angle to get people on board. So in that respect, we're an advocate. I don't know so much about the African Union. I expect it has some funding for projects like that. And it's just about reviewing what's out there and then seeing, okay, where does this fit with our objectives comfortably, and then directly reaching out.
Wow. And then I don't know about you guys, but one of the biggest thank you for your response. I'm sure Martin liked that before I continue. But one of the biggest things that we have in one of the biggest debates we have about strategy and moving forward is how we relate to existing parties. And this is a question that Jack has asked: how would we consider collaborating with political parties? And I think there's obviously Volt Europa in Europe. So maybe that would be for you, Chris. What's the relationship between Jeff and the European Federalists and Volt Europa? I mean, they seem to have a very overlapping focus.
So I should emphasize there's my personal opinions, and then there's the opinions of Jeff Europe, right? So the opinion of Jeff Europe is that it is a movement, not a party itself, just as YWF is, and it it recognizes that it needs to work with all parties, except for the ones that are directly against what we want in a nasty way, to get what we need. Because at the end of the day, we need both sides of the political debate, as it were, to be on board. Otherwise, Europe or federalism or world federalism remain the question rather than something that's a consensus opinion. So, in our sections that are more left-wing, the question is, okay, how do we get more conservatives? And vice versa, because we want to have a political consensus around what we want to achieve. Volt is actually, we have close relations with Volt because there's often overlap with the people. Some of our members think that the quickest way to make this change happen is to directly establish a party that runs on the platform of the things we want to get the change we want. My personal opinion, it is my personal opinion, not Jeff's opinion, is that has never worked in history, and it's better to use the existing party framework. So we work with Volt as we do any other party, but we don't endorse it more than the others. We're cooperating with everybody. And I think the same would be true for the YWF level as well. It's about just finding allies anywhere you can get them and building a broad base of support.
Yeah, I agree. I think we should really focus on the existing parties or maybe the ones in power. But sometimes we get a little defeatist, think that that's not possible. But.
Yeah, but I want to add something about that. Indeed, even in Italy, there were some, federalist parties, but they never worked. But there is also a simple reason to that. It's because if you are a party, it means that you want to reach the power, and you want to reach you are candidate also for national elections. So it means that you have to take part of the national debate and decide which side you join in the different topics, right? And it's the same at the European level. I mean, in any case, there are some issues at the European level too that are, I don't know, related to environment, industrial policy, taxation, whatever. That as a party, you cannot avoid to take a position, right? So it means that, of course, you will alienate the people that have a different way of thinking respect on these different issues. And moreover, you are a competitor after. So you're a competitor of these parties. So it means that, they don't want to collaborate with you too much because you are an enemy, let's say. So this is why we prefer to collaborate with existing parties, of course, and not create new ones. And indeed, for example, it's not forbidden to be a member of whatever political party and be a member of the GEF, or in our case also the YWF, of course. Of course, let's say that it would be strange, to have a guy coming from a fascist party that is also a member of GEF Europe. That's something that never happened, of course, but yeah, I mean, at least you are inside the democratic system. It's totally fine if you are a conservative or someone from the left. It doesn't matter.
Yeah. I would just say there's a really good analogy for how to work with parties that I've remembered, and it's there's a British Federalist during the war called Barbara Wootton, and at the time, basically the communists were the main skeptics of having a federal union of the democracies, and her line was that federalism is kind of a technical question for her. She said, if you think about a train. And on your train, you have lots of different people. You have conservatives, socialists, liberals, greens, what have you. They're all going to different places. Where they see the end, the utopia for them, it's different for each group. But in order to achieve that worldwide, they all need that train to work. They need the engine that's going to get them there. And for her and for me and for I think all of us, federalism is the engine. If we can't have a federal system, then we can't achieve any of those utopias because the response worldwide is going to be different in different places. So for each party, they share the interest in having a federal setup. Our mission is just to persuade them of that.
If you want, I can tell you an analogy that I'm I invented and I use sometimes. That is like that we are not choosing if we want to put red or white wine in the bottle. We want to create the bottle. That's the thing.
It's beautiful. I love it. You know, you could really go really in depth with the types of wine. You know, you could start listing, you know, Chardonnay and Rosé, really get in there. I could expand the analogy, Luca. All right. So on a serious note, I think that one of the most interesting things that I like about Jeff is and the European Federalists. Is it Jeff or Jeff? Am I mispronouncing it?
Good. Yeah, Jeff.
Okay. Always wondered. I don't want to be slighting you guys this whole time. Okay. Is the Congress on the island in Italy
Ventotene?
Ventotene. Okay. But Luca, how do you really pronounce that?
Ventotene.
Ventotene. Okay, yeah. I think that's great, and I'm really impressed by that. And I think that I mean, we're sort of talking a little bit about the Congress. It's a faraway idea at this point because for the obvious reasons.
Well, let's say that in any case, we would like to start to think about the Congress already this year. I mean, in terms of planning, let's say, because of course we are thinking in terms of participation in a way that at least we should have the money to provide accommodation and help for traveling for the delegates, at least. Of course, we were thinking about to have a kind of hybrid Congress in a way that people can connect also on internet. So because one of the things the COVID is doing is to change the situation that Congress they has to be absolutely only physical. But I think in the future we should think about a hybrid situation because can help people that they for different reasons they cannot come. But definitely we should have enough money at least for the delegates, and that will depends also on the number of delegates too, and in which city we decide to have the Congress, because of course the cost of accommodation in Zurich is completely different to the cost of accommodation in I don't know, for example, Parma, my city. That is not super cheap, but is not expensive as Zurich for sure. So this is something that we have to take into account. This is why at the moment we don't want to say any kind of date, but definitely this is something that we would like to have in the next years. So not so distant future for sure.
Yeah, I mean, I was thinking like in an ideal world, we could get it all organized and have it in either summer or fall of this year. I mean, I don't mind setting optimistic goals. It's okay if we have to change them later. And I actually spoke to an old World Federalist in the U.S. That's the World Federalist movement. The average age is like 70, so there's a lot of like old people who really like that we exist and want to give us advice. And one of his pieces of advice was that we should have our own Congress alongside the Europeans in the Ventotene island, and almost it was a bit like we should, you know, sort of crash the party in a way. And I don't know about that, but you know, sort of, I think it's a good idea to at least take advantage and I don't know, collaborate there.
Sorry to interrupt, but in Ventotene there is the international seminar. There is not the Congress. The Congress is in different places every time, let's say. So, for example, the last Jeff Congress I was the one in Zurich that was I think in 2015. So the Ventotene ones is the international seminars that is organized mostly by Jeff and WEF Italy, in collaboration with Jeff and WEF Europe, and there are also people coming from in the WFM sometimes. But yeah, and I mean, let's say that the transportation to Ventotene are not so easy, so definitely there is a cost of transportation to take into account. So we have to think about where we would like to have it, taking into account how much it would be easy to reach the city, the cost of the hotels, and everything. So it's it would be quite a engaging organization, I would say. I never organized a Jeff Europe Congress, but I can imagine how much difficult it is. So let's imagine a World Congress. So I think we will need something like 1 year of entire planning. And of course, we can really start to think about it when we will have a decision on how many delegates we will have and the money we need.
Yeah. So what are some of the things that go into that? And is that something that Jeff would be interested in? Is like a group of World Federalists sort of, I don't know, having a crashing the party or having their own meeting alongside a Congress, wherever it is, I guess.
That's always super welcome. Very, very, very much welcome. One of the things I was thinking we could do in terms of cooperation is actually the other way around as well, where we have like a permanent Jeff delegation to YWF, so that there's like an actual formal link, which means I get more bodies on board in Jeff to help with the World Federalist cause. But yeah, no, I'm just trying to think about what dates might be useful for this conversation. Jeff Europe has its Congress every 2 years when we run the elections. The next one will be in mid to late November this year in the city of Liège. So Belgium, for the world, basically about 2 hours from Brussels, which people should know the name of. I know that WFM itself is looking at having a Congress in Brussels in the summertime. And obviously, Jeff will be linked in helping set that up if we can. And then the third date that might interest you, it's a bit further away, but 2022 is the 50th birthday of Jeff. And we're still at the beginning of discussions about it, but a couple of people have said, wouldn't it be cool if we had a big birthday party on Ventotene, our spiritual home, where this all began for us, on the island, and invited lots of people, and we could definitely link that with a YWF thing as well. But wherever you decide, whether it's in Europe or not as well, or indeed in the northern or southern hemispheres, as I'm seeing in the comments, we're happy to engage.
Yeah, that would be cool. I definitely like the party idea. Something a little more informal. I mean, I don't know. We're all young people, and especially if it's like we've all been vaccinated, I think there'll definitely be a lot of parties, and we may as well.
It's also important. It's also important.
It's part of the thing, yes.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, I think this possibility 2022, that is something really to think about, really. So let's think about it.
Yeah, there's another question here with here, I'll put it in how would YWF and World Federalists in general best support regional federation groups? So I guess the regional federation groups would be World or European Federalists in this context. I don't know. Maybe this is a question for you, Chris. What are some of the things that we could provide?
Yeah, my instinctive answer to that, Brandon, would be that at YWF level, we should get good at identifying what already exists. A lot of the things we're proposing are new, but there are institutions we can work with. So, take Africa as an example, because I think it's the next most developed after the European project. You've got the African Union. It's already been mentioned. We should be, looking for opportunities where we can latch on to potential sources of funding, a potential structure, like ideas on how politically Africa as a whole can integrate. But then within Africa, you've also got some smaller regional blocks that might prove useful too. Like there's ECOWAS I think that's in the east of Africa. There's a similar project in the west of Africa to unite countries there. So that's a good example. Over in East Asia, I think most people are familiar with ASEAN, which is uniting 10 very, very different countries. Actually, ASEAN is more more ethnically, linguistically, culturally diverse than Europe, and has a pretty, interesting track record for ethnic violence too, where a big peace project has come in and is making gains. So I would say at the global level, we don't need to kind of determine the entire map and which island should go in which block already, but a good starting point is identifying those regional projects that exist and how we can kind of latch onto those as a way of focusing our attention a bit. Moving forward. And of course, in Europe, you've got Jeff already who is doing that, and we're happy to fully work to that end.
And but I think yes, it's something to. For example, yesterday during the team meeting, we discussed about the launch of the continental free trade zone in Africa, and we quite agreed also with Martin that could be a positive way to launch more the movement in Africa. So it's also to keep attention to all these kind of news that arise sometimes, but also to take into account, I think, how certain aspects that can happen in the different regions can affect the world. I think this is something that YWF should take into account in terms of exploiting the different occasions that arrives, in terms also of communication. I mean, I was just thinking yesterday that what happened, for example, in US just some days ago, in reality can be explained also from a Federalist perspective, in a way that because the consequences of the global economic integration of the world, even state continents like US or China, they have problem to handle the situation by themselves. And when you are not able to control the situation, normally what's happening is the fact that you try to have more constraint domestically. You start to isolate yourself. And isolating yourself, it means that most probably the nationalism arise. And of course, at a certain point also that will kill democracy itself. So there is a connection, if you want, indirectly, of course, to what happened now in US and the process of globalization in the world.
Yeah, I think it's important for us all to. I personally see most domestic or national issues as somehow connected to geopolitics and global affairs. There's very little issues that I see are like specifically national jurisdiction, but that's something that the World Federalist movement itself, we don't really have a firm position on. Some members of the movement think that the main idea should be to solve climate change and that's it, and others think that we should have one education system and one healthcare system for the whole world. So it's just there's varying degrees of size of the federal democratic world federation that we're fighting for. But I agree. Yeah, and I think that it's important that we one way to phrase it would be to view the attacks on democracy in the US and in other authoritarian regimes as a response to globalization. And I think you phrased it right, Luca, that they're unable to control things the way they want it, so they isolate. And I think that was a great way to phrase it. So we almost have to take the opposite stance and say, nation states have a hard time getting what they want in this world, and that's why we need to come together and to work together. There's another question now. I think we can. Why is it that supporting regionalism, even a good idea, everyone assumes it is, but I'm not sure it's so obvious? Chris, do you want to start?
Yeah, happy to. I think it's a good question, and I think it is something people should think about more, and how those regions can contribute. I'd say there's a few things. The first one, I think it is the main one for me, is about subsidiarity, which I don't know if every Federalist knows it as a concept, but it's an important one in the European Federalist mind. And it is that the powers of government should be allocated to the lowest appropriate level. right? And the debates we have about where that appropriate level is. The idea is we keep things close to the citizen. So when we look at everything we wish to achieve, there are some things that can only be tackled if the whole world is working together, the world, right? We know that. There's a lot of things that localities can do that nation states currently do because they want to get the glory. I come from the UK, where you have to get national permission to fit a cycling path in a local town. So I see that problem too. States can already, some things fit quite well with a state, especially if it matches a geographic shape. The regions we're talking about, it's a similar argument. There's a gap there in the structure currently between the whole world and specific countries. There are things that could affect, for example, the whole of South America, specific climatic phenomena, for example, that don't affect East Asia or don't affect it in the same way. And so for that, it helps fill a niche. I think there's also an argument when it comes to how to develop the World Federation. Obviously, we're taking multiple approaches as Federalists. One of them is to just directly empower the UN to have a parliamentary assembly and that's fully democratic and move forward in that way. But a lot of the thinkers, at least in Europe, are saying that if you can get some regional integration, you have strong pillars of equivalent size and power to help bring that about, where the connection between an individual country, like Turkmenistan, and the whole world, it's quite a large leap to make. So it's about, again, it's like bridging the gap. And then I think there's one more aspect, which I don't like to talk about as much, but it's about the inequality of size. And as Federalists, I think we all believe that the idea is that large and small states can have the same say. Like they're able to guarantee their own independence, but within this interdependent world. We see it in the US, where Rhode Island has the same number of senators as California, and we see it in the European Parliament allocation over here, where Malta has disproportionately more MEPs and Germany has disproportionately less to help address the concern. But we also see that those things do cause strain. The US presidential election, people have criticized that, Republican states where very few people live have disproportionate power to where most Americans live. So we can handle it to an extent, is what I'm trying to say. And if we applied the current set of UN member states to the world level directly, you would have Kiribati, nation of 30,000 people, on the same pegging as China, 1.3 billion people. And I think politically, that's just too hard on its own as a step for people to swallow. I think actually we need an intermediate set of bodies that help equalize it a bit. Yeah,
I mean, it's a very interesting debate for sure. I think that what Austin, the guy who asked this question, it's one of the fear amongst myself that I have, and I think that that brings people into the World Federalist movement specifically, and it's sort of a critique on regionalization, is that it might sort of just replace the nation state and copy the bad parts of the nation on a larger scale. And so, yeah, like the whole concept of fortress Europe and the border in the Mediterranean and that whole problem. So yeah, I don't know. It's that's where World Federalism comes in to say, yeah, I mean, these borders we don't need these. We should all just work together. There should be no borders. I mean, yeah, even between regions of the country or of the world.
I agree with that. In some respects, they will play a role that a state currently plays, which is less than desirable. And that's why the World Federalist level is essential to end that. So I think it's a bit polemical to say it's a fortress for white people. Like I understand the problem very, very well. But equally, one of the things that would help address this is if we could have more federalism in North Africa. If it was able to stand on its own 2 feet and not be tampered with by the European Union, by the US, by others, have full democratic accountability for its own citizens, it would be in a much stronger, more prosperous situation that this problem might not even have occurred in the first place, where Europe overreacts to migration flows. That's not me defending the current policy. As Jeff, we criticize it and we have concrete proposals on how to address it. But what I'm saying is that federalism all round would help address that problem specifically. And even if it does, we still need that global level. So it's not about either or. It's For Jeff, it's about regional and global.
Mm.
Can't have one without the other.
Luca, you can go.
Yeah, so for example, when we think about public goods, we know that there are global public goods, but also national public goods, but there are also regional public goods in the sense of continental or subcontinental public goods. And this is related to what Chris was saying. So some kind of intermediate level could be necessary even in the future. Of course, I sympathize also to the people that said that, but you are creating just the larger states, and you will end up with a problem that maybe will be even bigger than before. This is why the process of the federalization, and this is one of the reasons why I also in the YWF, the process of federalization, they have to go parallel. They have to proceed in parallel, and in what way world federalism will be achieved is probably not something that we can control. And this is exactly the same as in Europe. This is something that I'm saying every time also during this conversation in Discord, etc. That we cannot control everything, and we have to be ready to jump on the horse that seems to be the most promising. I would say this is a little bit, if you want, cynical a bit, but is necessary. And so this is why, and also Jeff, from what I understood from Chris, that we are not taking any kind of position in terms of what is the best way to achieve world federation. First of all, because we want to be flexible and see how is going on the path, but also because we cannot control it in any case. We can try to influence a bit, but it will be a historical process that it depends on so many actors that is basically impossible to define, and to control. I mean, the point is that we cannot have the path that we personally want. We will get the path that we will get. And there is nothing to do in this sense. And what we can do is to try to understand what's going on in the path, what is not good, how we can be addressed, how we can be fixed, and try to make some deviations maybe. But that's it. Really, there is no way, at least not in a democratic way, that you can solve this problem.
Yeah. And I think that's one of the biggest things. And we have this debate often. The Discord channel is very oftentimes full of this exact debate. One of the points that I like to hammer on is, we have our own values, as supporting human rights and peace and the end of war and climate change. So I like to say that democratic federalization is not inherently good. So that needs to be underpinned by some sort of morality and values. So I really stress that point. So I agree with you, Luca, when you say that, we're not the leaders of the world as much as we might think we are. So it's not really up to us. But what we can do is critique whatever pathway does continue. So, I mean, one of the, like we've already mentioned in this call, is that Biden may lead a democratic union of sorts, or there's another pathway that some world federalists like NATO plus, or like the security community. Personally, those are not my favorite pathways to world federation. I support them in my role as a young world federalists. But yeah, so I think that our job, if those do take off and become the pathways that get the most support, would be to say that they should be better. Like, this is okay, this is cool, but it shouldn't be used to abuse human rights or start a war with countries or something like that. Personally, that's my view. Yeah. So, any comments?
Chris?
I think that's precisely right. You've got to be agnostic about the mechanism and the process, and then we support it and we tidy all of the mess up once we're at a more developed state. If there's anything we can learn from the experience of European integration so far, it's precisely that. There were multiple different institutions set up, proposed through the decades, and eventually, as one of them became, the European Economic Community became stronger and more decisive, we then went through this process of treaty change to tidy up the landscape a bit, incorporate them into the one project, which is why now Jeffers can engage with this one political project rather than like 5 or 6. And for me, I just see YWF as being in that situation where we have multiple roads and we've got to go down all of them at the same time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And going back to what you were saying about the issue of, what did you say, size? And as an American, I definitely understand where you're coming from. It's pretty interesting to think about. A lot of young world federalists like to debate what a potential world federation would look like and how do we address this problem. Obviously, India and China have billions of people, and then you have tiny countries in the South Pacific. How do we address that? And so a lot of them say a common thing is just to copy the bicameral legislature of that some countries have, including the United States. So giving small countries a vote at in a Senate of sorts, and then and then a representative legislature at the lower level. In Europe, I think that should also be taking place. I personally think that a federal Europe wouldn't have this council with national governments being the president of Europe on a rotating. It's nice. It's great. It's a great step towards the right direction. But
no, you've basically read the Jeff political platform. That's exactly what we say. The council shall be abolished. Replaced with the Senate.
Leave the national people. It's basically like if the governor of California was the president of the United States for 6 months. Or something like that. It doesn't make any sense.
It's insane. It's insane.
Yeah. So I think that should be, and then that could also make it so that the Parliament, the European Parliament, was actually, you could get rid of the digressive proportionality and then have a Senate that took care of that issue with equal votes for all the states.
Yeah, I agree. I would just caution, that is a perfect way of addressing the problem. But it has the one weakness which we are currently seeing in the US, where there's like a limit to how much of a over-representation people politically can tolerate. And I think the regional level is a negative argument for federalism, but I think it is an important one. And in times of crisis like the one we are now seeing, you start to understand why addressing it in any way we can is a thing worth considering.
Yeah, it's tricky. Yeah, there's no perfect answer here. But the point that we try to do, and with a lot of these questions that keep coming up, basically a lot of the people always come in and ask us about Russia and China. And those are everybody said, okay, so what's the answer here? And we're like, we don't know what the answer is. We have no idea. It could be this, it could be that. Probably we don't advocate war. I think that's not at all on our platform or agenda. But it's the point that we try to do is to offer a space for these debates to take place and to bring people in to engage. And if we had a Congress of sorts, I'd imagine that the way to structure a world federation, what sort of global public goods do we want? Do we want a welfare state where we can all, a global welfare state? Do we want taxing the rich countries and giving to the poor countries, this sorts of things? Or how it's all structured. Though this is the debate that we want to have, and I think,
I think that point related to Russia and China and so on is more related to, I don't know, for example, you want to have a reform of the United Nations. In that sense, okay, you cannot get over of China and Russia. They are too much important in the system of United Nations that you have to find an agreement in any case. Or you want to proceed first with the democracies, yes, but it means that you are going out of basically the United Nations framework. That could be even problematic for the system of the United Nations. So there are pros and cons, right? And I think again it's difficult because we are not even in the public debate, something like that, So I mean, it's interesting to have this conversation between us, but I think now we should focus more on put the debate in place and after see what will happen. And after we can take some decision. I think it's more like the idea of let's throw a rock in the lake and see what we produce, and that should be, at least for the short term, this is the plan. The main milestone now, apart the Congress, of course, but the main milestones for us at the moment is to reach the public and get people think about it.
Yeah, and I think a Congress would be really cool, even if it was just online to start, or just but I think that would be the ideal. I mean, it would be really cool to see like the European Federalists as maybe even like a faction of some sort of World Federalist Congress, alongside the ideological groups. I personally consider myself a bit of a lefty, so I would probably not be in charge of. I would not be the chair of this Congress.
Oh, don't worry. I really think that this first Congress would be super funny. I can tell you. I will enjoy so much you cannot even imagine.
Yeah, I think it would be great, and I would love to see the debates, and it would be cool if we could. I mean, there's a lot of youth movements related to parties and national or global youth movements. I know a lot of political parties have sort of international unions. There's one for like center-right parties, and it's headquartered in Munich, and then there's one for like democratic socialist parties, which is headquartered in Berlin. I think it's really funny that they're both headquartered in Germany. But either way, they're like really big international unions of political parties. And I would love to reach out to those and say, okay, you guys should be like the factions in our Congress. And I think they could represent the ideologies a little bit. Yeah, I think that'd be cool. Luca?
Yeah, no, I mean, I think that eventual different factions, they will create by themselves without any help. I mean, it's something that will happen, I'm sure. And it's part of the process, let's say. So
yeah,
I'm totally okay.
We just have to put the signs on the wall, and people will go to their group. We put the sign on the wall. Okay, socialists in this corner.
No, but they will be by themselves. It's not necessary. But yeah, I would like to exploit these last minutes to again ask people to engage with the movement, to fill the forms for the global team or the chapters team, to think about creating their chapters in their cities. Yeah, let's do it.
Yeah, and I put the sign up. It's in the description of this YouTube video. So if you just scroll down, I think it says newsletter, but if you click that link, it's the main sign up. So if you want to start a chapter or join the team or just get the newsletter, that is the first step. Is to fill out that form, and then you'll get emails regarding all the different pathways that you can get involved in YWF. And maybe, Chris, you'd like to plug the ways people can get involved in Jeff.
Yeah, well, what I would say is I welcome emails from anybody who's interested. So you can hit me on my name, chris.powers@jef.eu. We have, if you just look for Young European Federalists, you'll find us on all the different social media. You'll find our websites where you can also get things like a newsletter. But I suspect this won't be the last time that we're in contact with one another. So I'm sure we will we will have plenty more opportunities to chat.
Yeah. Well, this has been really insightful, and I appreciate you taking the time this morning to talk to us about all these topics. Pretty diverse.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Absolute pleasure.
All right. I'm going to close the end broadcast.
And remember that there will be the evening session.
At 20:30 UTC.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know. That could be tonight or tomorrow morning, depending on where you are in the world. But yeah. And we'll have Daniel and John and Liam, our chapters coordinator, to talk more about chapters and how to get
campaigns
and campaigns. Exactly. Okay.
Okay.
Ending broadcast.
Yeah. Thank you.